Hello, everybody. Thank you and welcome to our monthly One Water Solutions Institute webinar series. My name is Sarah Milanick. I'm the Associate Director at Colorado State University's One Water Solutions Institute, and I'll be the moderator today. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping things. This webinar is being recorded and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. I'll pop the link for that channel into the chat during the webinar in case you want to look at some of the other products and tools that we offer. All participants are currently joined with your microphones muted and your cameras turned off. We're going to try to use the Q&A feature to address questions to help keep things organized, but based on past experience, we understand that some external organization settings prevent certain attendees from accessing the Q&A. If that applies to you, feel free to just throw your questions in the chat and I will do my best to keep them organized. If you do have a question and want to interact with our presenter, please raise your hand and I can go ahead and activate your microphone. We hope this will be a pretty interactive session and are welcoming all questions. If you would like proof of attendance for this webinar for the purpose of earning continuing education credits, you can email owsi@colostate.edu. I'll throw that email address in the chat as well, and we can provide a confirmation email for the attendance for that CE documentation. Okay. So today's webinar is going to dive into the key features of the low flow tool to explore real world use cases and share best practices to help y'all streamline your workflow. So without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our presenter today, and I'll turn this over to him to kick us off. So Tyler Weibel is the Associate Director for Software Innovation at the One Water Solutions Institute. And I can see your screen, Tyler, and I know we can hear you. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Perfect. Thank you for that introduction, Sarah. As she mentioned, feel free to raise your hand. She can unmute you and interrupt me with any questions. I'm happy to take those as we go. This isn't going to be a full hour or anything like that. This is a pretty straightforward tool with a pretty straightforward presentation. So happy to take a couple side detours around questions and answers and demonstrations. So today we're going to be going over the low flow analysis tool, which is one of a number of different flow analysis tools that we've built into our products over the years. This one's really for low flow assessment and calculation for smart water management. More generally speaking, it's a pretty straightforward dashboard that allows you built into a subset of tools we've developed for the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment that pulls all of the gauge record stations from USGS and the Colorado Division of Water Resources into a single dashboard where you can go automate some of these low flow calculations. As I said, this belongs to a subset of tools sponsored by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's Water Quality Control Division. We've partnered with them for more than a decade, I think, at this point, for a whole suite of tools, and there'll be some links at the very end of this presentation, and Sarah will be sharing them in the chat as well, of all the different tools that we have access to. We've had some webinars in the past on a few of these. We're going to have some more in the future, so keep an eye on that calendar, and feel free to attend more than one of these if you think there's good overlap in those tools. We've got upcoming demonstrations of the Watershed Rapid Assessment Program. We did one a couple months ago for the Watershed Prioritization Tool. We're working on rolling out the TMDL dashboard, the Colorado Water Assessment Tool and Reporter, and the Econ Feasibility Dashboard this year. Last year we did a lot of work on designated planning agency resources, and then we've got 2 more going live this summer after approval of various levels for water quality scenario planning and statewide water quality management plan work. So today we're focused on that very last one, which is the low flow analysis dashboard. This actually builds on probably the better part of 15 years worth of flow statistics and analysis that we've automated in our web services behind the scene. Now, I'm not going to ask you or quiz you any of the acronyms in here or what all these do, but the point is that our platform, the Catena Analytics web platform, is a cloud-based GIS engine with micro data services. So the left half of this is really kind of where the interface comes in, the Catena GIS. That's where Material UI, React Redux, all those things give you the user experience, the interaction with the map, the specific set of inputs to those tools. The right half is really where all the actual work takes place. So that's where we fetch the data sets. That's where we automate the calculations for things like low flow. We'll go through each of those equations, of course. And then that all sits inside of eRAMS's cloud infrastructure that sits at the Scott Building at Colorado State University. belonging to One Water Solutions. So it's made up of a lot of different pieces. The fun part is that we actually have a pretty straightforward work. So you can pull this up on your phone, you can pull this up on your laptop, you can pull this up on your desktop, and you land on the low flow analysis dashboard. What that does is interact with kind of two different sets that interacts with external data sets and resources like USGS, specifically their National Water Information System for monitoring location metadata, as well as their data sets themselves, so you can get real-time and historic discharge information, right? This is a flow analysis presentation, so we're talking about stream and river discharge measurements. We've also spidered out into the Colorado Department of Water Resources, CDWR, and their REST services that provide very similar station metadata and data set extraction. Parallel to that is actually accessing our own cloud. We have a bunch of different internal data sets. The tool right now runs off of location metadata information from USGS and CDR that's stored locally. We're actually in the middle of converting that and launching that over the summer to use live connection out to USGS and CDWR. So this web demonstration may get repeated with a brand new front end that looks a little bit shinier than the old one here in a few months, but we'll see how that goes. And then it leverages mostly on the back end one specific data resource inside of CSIP, our Cloud Services Innovation Platform. This is where the microservices do all of the data extraction, automated analyses and such. And that's really kind of a Java Apache Tomcat backend that runs a lot of our analyses. Specifically, the low flow analysis dashboard is intended to query, analyze, and organize streamflow data for around the topic of low flow design flows. Design flows are usually what you're interested in when you're looking at permitting for wastewater treatment plants, for stormwater, for low flow conditions, for environmental health, human health, etc. And there's a whole bunch of different ways that you can calculate these. There's extreme value based methods, there's biologically based methods, there's human health, and then we got a subsection of this that's specific to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment and their Regulation 31 for in-stream standards. We've got a summary just specifically built for them since they're the one that paid for the tool. They got a special little niche analysis in addition to the general one. As a highlight, before we go into the technical side of all these pieces, the low flow analyses that are inside of this dashboard are all based on the DFlow program out of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. So it runs the exact same source code that DFlow does. We actually have a copy of it from them on purpose so that you have a one-to-one with their analysis methods and data sets with what you're getting out of this tool, specifically so that the state can use it for assessing compliance and design around discharge permits for various point source discharges, as well as just general environmental conditions. What this dashboard actually allows you to do has a lot of different features. It automates and simplifies access to USGS and DWR's stream gauge records. I don't know the last time any of you tried to by hand go into USGS. You get to spend about 20 minutes every time you want a different data set to try and drill into exactly the piece that you want out of those dashboards. They're not exactly friendly. DWR is about the same. It's a little bit different system run by the state versus the feds, but it's still not an easy process to get in and get exactly what you want unless you bookmarked that one gauge 5 years ago. That's exactly correct. The dashboard's also flexible in the way that allows you to assess one or more low flow analyses, and we'll go through what that one or more means, but you can either run them in their default configuration or you can use kind of an advanced approach and specify your own low flow statistics that you want to calculate. Again, I want to highlight this is consistent with the EPA DFlow methodology. It actually runs the DPA Fortran source code in the background, so it's a one-to-one with what they've got. This is useful for quantifying low flows, state discharge permitting, Reg 31 reporting. Those are specific use cases to the state of Colorado, but it also allows you to go in and customize your low flow calculations. And just in general, this is a public interface tool that's free and available to anybody, thanks to the Department of Public Health and Environment, that they can go in and assess what is the low flow conditions at a particular site. So that's where the fun really starts. Now, when I say low flow, there's a bunch of different mathematical ways that you can calculate these. These are kind of grouped into different sections. So if you hear me referring to these, we're going to go through these a little bit slowly, but I kind of want to highlight the differences between them. Extreme value design flows are basically taking an M day, like a 1 day, a 3 day, a 5 day, a 7 day, whatever that M is. It's just a number. So think of it as like a 5 day low flow. Arithmetic mean fitting a log Pearson type 3 distribution to that data set, and then calculating the R year, so that's a 5-year, a 10-year, a 20-year low flow condition non-exceedance. Sorry. Biologically based flows are a little bit different than that. They actually use an M-day harmonic mean instead of an arithmetic mean, and there's various reasons for that in the literature that I'm going to cite at the end that actually points that out, and it's also referenced in the tool. And then rather than doing distribution fitting, the biologically based flows actually are empirical, so they fit and calculate that R year non-exceedance out of the observed data set and flow excursions. So we'll go into what those terms mean. The final category is human health design flows. That one's actually probably the very simplest. It is literally just the harmonic mean of the gauge record. That's it. It's super straightforward. You take the entire gauge record, you calculate the harmonic mean. That is human health design flows. I do want to highlight, and you'll see this on the right side of the screen in the bright orange box or pink box, salmon, I guess we'll call it. CDPHE Reg 31 uses a lot of low flow conditions for their permitting and assessment. These are a series of biologically based flows. So they don't leverage the extreme value and they don't leverage the human health. They specifically just focus on the biologically based flows for a different number of M-day and R values, right? So we change R from 1 day to 3 day to 5 day to 30 day. And you change R from 5 to 10 to 3, I think, year. And we'll go over those pieces. Again, diving into each one of these one by one, the extreme value design flows calculate an M-day minimum. Arithmetic mean, so that's a running minimum, right? So you take today and you take your 3-day average, and you take tomorrow's 3-day average, the next day's 3-day average, and you do that for the entire gauge record. Then per water year, and I want to highlight this because this is different than a lot of methodology in streamflow. The way that DFlow works is per water year defaulting to the start of the water year on April 1st, not October 1st. That's a fun little difference. It calculates the minimum within that year, so to speak. And then as a side note, DFlow actually doesn't handle leap years. It actually ignores February 29th data. So every 4 years, your M-day low flow might be a little bit off, especially since February tends to be a low flow condition for a lot of places around Colorado. So just pay attention to that. That's a limitation of the DFlow methodology, but they don't handle that. Again, the next step in there is to fit the log Pearson type 3. So that's calculating all the method of moments and fitting the distribution to those parameters for standard deviation, for mean, for skewness, all that fun stuff. And then from that fitted distribution, calculating the normalized non-exceedance value for the R year or 5-year or 10-year or whatever integer you place in for R return flow that you want to calculate. Similarly, biologically based flows have a very similar approach. They use the same April 1st start year minimum M-day arithmetic mean, which is again different. What they then do is a little bit different. Biologically based flows are actually a recursion and convergence based method. So what they do is they calculate the number of flow excursions for a trial low flow. What that actually means is you assume a low flow before you calculate this. And then for that low flow, you count the number of M-day average low flows that are below that threshold. Then you successively refine your low flow estimate and recalculate how many flow excursions using the method of false position, and you check against convergence and keep iterating until your flow excursions are right at the threshold that is set for the method. Once that's done, the very final version of what your final design low flow gets calculated. The very final step is to calculate your excursion clusters. That's just a property of grouping all those flow excursions or times that you're below that low flow level and calculating the little bundle of them. That's all it really means. Finally, human health design flows are the simplest, of course. These are the harmonic mean ones. It's literally just calculating a harmonic mean of the low flow conditions. This actually also includes a weighting of non-zero flow days. So behind the scenes, there's a special calculation to weight non-zero flow days for the count of how many non-zero flow days there are against the period of record. So if you have 20 low flow days out of 100, 20% of your analysis is going to be skewed off by those zeros. So this actually weights us back for the ones that are non-zero flow days. This is really useful in ephemeral streams where you don't have continuous year-round flow. It's a little bit different than the freeze over in the winter. Sometimes there is flow in those conditions. We're talking the ones that kind of dry up, not the ones that freeze over. But that's human health design flows. Fun part, like I've mentioned all along, is this was done around the EPA design flows, DFlows documentation. So we actually started this tool 10 years ago or more and followed their methodology to a T and came up with a different answer than they did using their DFlow algorithm, which was an interesting QA process that we had to source out. And it turned out that the selection of the window, right, that moving average, whether you center it, you left justify or right justify, right? Am I calculating today, tomorrow, and Thursday, or am I calculating Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or am I calculating Sunday, Monday, Tuesday for my centering of my 3-day average window? That was an assumption behind the scenes that wasn't documented, as well as how they handle those zeros and the weighting scheme after that, as well as the issues with handling with not handling leap years, skews the results of these low flows, especially around here. So what we ended up doing is after this QA pass, before the tool ever went live, we actually got in touch with EPA Region 8, who oversees Colorado, with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. They're the feds just above them. And we got a copy of their source code. So we actually have DFlow behind the scenes now. Instead of the follow the exact methodology, it's follow the exact source code. So there's a 1-to-1 on the exact. You put in the same thing with their executable versus you put in the same data set in this tool, it'll run. It'll run the same way with the same answer. So there's a real defensibility of that we went through and confirmed that with. That link at the top of the page, feel free to copy that down. That's the actual landing page. EPA still maintains a lot of documentation for DFlow. It hasn't changed a lot in recent years. They've rolled it into a few of their own interfaces, but the base package is just an executable that sits on your desktop and runs. Now you ask, why don't we just use DFlow? Well, historically, kind of the left side of both of the two sets of images, DFlow was a command line tool. You actually had to pull up a command line, run an executable, and the summary you got was in a command line. It wasn't a text file. It was a screen capture, and then you had to pull the numbers back out of it. That was their first version back in the late 80s, early 90s. They actually came out with a second version in the early 90s, mid 90s, version 2. That one actually wrote output files, so it was a little bit easier to work with, but again, it was still a command line executable to run it and then generate that output file. So there wasn't a lot of helpfulness to user interfaces. So the reason that we worked on this project in the first place was to automate that process, because we're a software development team for the most part, and simplify that for people who didn't want to have to get into the nitty-gritty of how do I run an executable on a Windows computer that's 5 years or 20 years newer than when this executable was last run. So we streamlined all that behind the scenes of this tool. That's the purpose of that. And like I said, highlighted at the beginning, that's one of the big benefits is you don't have to pull out DFlow and run it by the command line anymore, right? You can actually just use this interface, which is much easier to get to, much easier to see what you're putting in and get the summary back out in the same effort. So walking through what this actually looks like, I'm going to go through a few different screenshots, and then if we've got time for it after Q&A or during Q&A, I'll pull up a live demonstration we can walk through what this looks like. If you go to the link provided at the end of this or in the documentation for this tool, you're going to land on the low flow analysis dashboard. So it's going to look like this. The top right corner is basically the list of CDPHE tools present in our ERAMS application. Our ERAMS application has a little pop-up and a big map. Map shows all the different stream gauging places in Colorado that have discharge data that you can go select. And then the pop-up allows you to filter those, right? You can search by keyword. You can draw on the map. You can upload a shape file. You can pick known boundaries like I want to go look in Denver County. I want to go look in Montrose County. I want to go look inside of the Cache La Poudre watershed, which is the big one that runs through Fort Collins, where we're all stationed up at CSU. You can basically filter down from the thousands, right? You don't want to actually look through those list of names down into the set that you actually care about. I ran an example of this of just looking for Boulder. So if you look for like Boulder Creek, you can see as I type that in on the interface, it highlights that. You can click the submit button. What it does is it's going to automatically shrink the number of points that are shown on that map to just the ones that include that keyword Boulder. You'll notice that there's a few up in the mountains on a Boulder Creek that's not actually Boulder Creek that comes out onto the plains. It's a little Boulder Creek that's on the other side of the divide. But once you get that, you can either select from the map, click on one of the little points, or you can go to the next step of this tool and you can interact with it. Once you pick one, I picked the one near Longmont, Boulder Creek at the mouth of the canyon near Longmont. You can see that on the left. What it does on the map is it puts a crosshair over it so you can see which one you're actually selecting. So that's a nice little one-to-one of which one or ones. You can click more than one if you hold Shift or Control as you're clicking in that list on the left. So if you want 5 of these, you can go calculate 5 of these, right? There's kind of those benefits that you can do. It gives you a nice metadata summary. So this is the metadata that we're talking about that it actually says, okay, which database is the blue ones appear to be USGS sites. The green ones are the Division of Water Resources sites. What's its name? What's its ID? Who runs it? The who runs it's a little bit different in the database because this tool is also spidered into the EPA WQX system on the back end. And there's a lot different. It's not that EPA runs every single one of those sites. It's that a lot of sites upload to WQX. So there's that's why that's there. Gives you the location information, which county, which state, which watershed it belongs to, or hydrologic unit code. So that's the watershed it belongs to. It's in the St. Vrain watershed. I know that one off the top of my head. Then it gives you a metadata summary and some quick links, right? So discharge has been monitored here since 1927. Flood data has been pulled here since 1927. It's got real-time 15-minute data pulled since 2007. There's a artificial limit in USGS's system that they have everything pre-2007 and everything post that you access a little bit differently for 15-minute data. But once you've picked one of these, you can go to the next step in the analysis dashboard and you can pick what you want to analyze. Now, this allows you to override any and all of the low flow analyses. You can also see some options up at the top. You can upload your own data, right? If you have supplemental information from a partner agency, think Forest Service, think watershed coalitions, think people that have their own gauge records in addition to what may have been shut off in the 90s or in the 60s. You can append your own data set to that and you can analyze it in conjunction with the gauge record or in replacement of the gauge record, right? You can pick, am I merging it or am I only analyzing mine or only analyzing the gauge? You can also filter down the analysis period that you're interested in, right? There's a ton of these gauges that date back to the early 1900s, and there's kind of questions of stationarity as to whether or not that is reflective of modern climate. So you can filter that to post 65 or whatever's useful from your analysis method, and calculate those or pre-post a reservoir going in kind of thing. If you want to look at some of the before and after statistics, those are good uses of trimming down your analysis period. Then you got a little drop-down box that actually allows you to pick, do I want to see everything? Do I want to just do the extreme value one? Do I want to just do the biologically based one? Do I want to just do the human health one? Do I want to do the Reg 31 summary? You can also override changing the start of that water year, right? If you want to use a water year that starts October 1st, a little bit more in line with USGS's methodology, you can do that. You can leave it defaulted to the April 1st that DFlow uses, or you can change it to something custom. You can go to a calendar year, right? You can also go through and modify that M-day R year, right? 4-day, 10-year. You can change those numbers, right? Do I want a 3-day? Do I want a 7-day? Do I want a 30-day low flow? Do I want a 5-year recurrence interval? Do I want a 2-year recurrence interval? Do I want a 10-year recurrence interval? You can override any of those. And then it gives some guidance on kind of what the limitations for those excursion clusters are, right? So every 120 days, we want a max of 5 excursions below that low flow value up to converge to. It's a little bit sensitive to that. The biologically based flows are, so be careful what you pick that to. You can't get too fine just because of some of the nitty gritty in the convergence algorithm inside of DFlow that gets a little hung up and messy. And then of course you've got linkages to, do I want to just have an image or do I want an interactive graph? Do I want to follow the documentation and see where these analyses came from? Help, right? What do I click on next? Or maybe you just want the flow data, right? You can click the download data button and get a copy from USGS or Division of Water Resources if this is my gauge record, this is my data set. And of course the run model button. Run model button is what we're going to click on next. That gives you first and foremost a summary, just time series, right? This is an interactive graph that you can click and drag on that graph and you can zoom into various sections of that flow record. You can see the big 2013 flood that hit the Front Range and the big spike above 8,000 in this particular record. You can also see that even though it dates back to 1927, there's a big gap. So maybe you want, during your low flow analysis summary, you want to do kind of that 1975, 76 post-analysis period, or you can analyze the pre-period, or you can analyze everything. You keep scrolling down the page, you'll get a summary of which station you've got, right? So it shows your gauge ID, station name, how many observations you have, what's the period of record, right? 1927 to 2025. I ran this a couple days ago, so it's got a April 13th timestamp on it. Then it gives you a summary of your low flows, right? It tells you what your M is that you ran your analysis with. So we're looking at a 4-day low flow. It tells you what your return period is, so 10-year. is what we're aiming at. And then it gives you your summary of your extreme value design flow, 0.3 CFS, your human health, 7.1. And then biologically based flows actually is a multi-summary. It gives you an overall value, and then it gives you a monthly value, right? So it calculates that value for just the month of January, just the month of February, just the month of April. And it also highlights what year that actually occurred, was observed in, that met the exact excursion cluster. So you can see that highlight of when that low flow was kind of set. You can keep scrolling and you get down to the Reg 31 design summary. And I want to pause and talk about this one just a little bit. This one is a customized summary. It's just taking that monthly summary that you saw up above for biologically based flows and pre-running it a bunch of times for CDPHE, because they use all of these at once in the way that they do their permitting and analyses. So kind of the first chunk of this, that first set of columns, is a 1 day, 3-year monthly low flow. They refer to it as an acute monthly low flow. They've got documentation, you can dig into it on that. But it gives you that for, again, the entire record, as well as your January, February, all the way down through December values. The second set of columns is dedicated to what they refer to as their chronic monthly low flows. These are a 7 day, 3-year, right? So it's got that same 3-year, but this time it's a weekly low flow instead of a daily low flow. And you notice there's some big differences there, right? You'll notice for the acute, your low flow is 2.2 CFS versus 0.3 CFS. Well, that's 50% bigger, right? There's some significant differences in there. Then the last column is what they use for their chronic monthly. So this is a 30-day, 3-year. The 30 is an approximation of calendar month, right? Because we're not going to do a 31, 30, 29, 28, 30, 31, right? We're not going to switch that every month in order to get that calculation window slid. So what they do is a 30-day monthly low flow, and again, a 3-year recurrence interval, and it shows you those numbers. And again, those are drastically different than the acute and the weekly chronic, so to speak. Then there's one extra row appended in here. It's a 1 day, 5-year, as opposed to a 3-year annual median discharge. All right, so it's a different statistic, it's a different return period. All of the pieces about that one's different, but again, it's useful in the way that Regulation 31 is designed for water quality standards. So all of that gets bundled into this nice little summary table. And that's the Reg 31 summary as you keep scrolling down the interface. The last section of the interface is really dedicated to assessing and reviewing the cumulative distribution frequency, right? I said that the biologically based flows are empirically based. This is an empirical CDF driven from the data set, right? If I go back a few of these, you'll see that we've got 26,478 records, just right below the supervising agency line. You got 26,000 records. So you actually have a pretty good long-term record here that you can get a pretty smooth empirical CDF curve that you can calculate these exceedance frequencies off of from daily data. This is where the biologically based data pulls most of their content from, is against this CDF curve. You'll also notice below this curve, and again, this curve can be downloaded as a graph, downloaded as an image, downloaded as a data set. You can download this to an Excel file or a CSV and use any of this offline. That's the real fun of these. Then the last section is really just the citations, right? Where did we get the streamflow data? When was it accessed? What are the methods for the period calculation, for the low flow calculation, all of those. So there's a citation for the statistics, there's a citation for D-flow, there's a citation for USGS, all those pieces. So it's meant to be a transparent, this is what you put into it, this is what you got out of it, this is the documentation, how to get from A to B. That's the end-to-end of the interface, right? You can customize this, you can run one of these analyses, you can run more of these analyses, you can run one station, you can run dozens of stations. The only other feature that I want to highlight is, I'm sure you saw at the beginning when you picked your station. Again, you can pick your station based on the map, or you can pick your station based on the pop-up. I've minimized the pop-up in this screenshot. So you'll notice right here, if you can see my mouse, I've minimized that pop-up, so I'm not even looking at it. In the little station metadata summary, there's 4 little buttons down here, and a 5th. I won't talk about the 5th. Each one of these basically pre-calculates whichever one of these design flows you want. So if you clicked on one of these, you can ignore the rest of the interface, and you're going to get this short, quick start summary of, and this is Reg 31 for that site, done, right? Run it with the default parameters, the default period of record, etc. You don't have to go through all the steps if you just know exactly what you're looking for. You can do a quick analysis. So again, I've highlighted that for the Reg 31 summary. I could click it for the biologically based, the extreme value, human health, whatever. If you click that advanced one, all it's going to do is open that pop-up that I minimized, and let you edit all of those inputs. That's the advanced options. So we did the full version of it. This is the quick version of it. If you just want to drill in and say, show me, you can just click on the pop-up and say, I want the human health design flow here. Click, done, right? You don't have to go through all the rest of the steps of the interface. This is the quick dive in version of it. If you want any of the resources for this tool, we've got a documentation site that sits at erams.com. There's a page specific to a lot of the CDPHE tools, including the low flow analysis tool. In there, you're going to have a link to the tool itself. So if you've missed that link at the beginning that I shared with you, sorry. First one is the dashboard, not the documentation. erams.com/cdphe/low flow analysis is the landing point for the website. So if you follow that URL, you're going to end up there and you're going to have access to the low flow analysis tool. Like I said, this is public. Go play with it. Watch the YouTube video if you have any questions. The second link on this page is where the documentation sits. So erams.com hosts a whole bunch of different documentation for our Katina website. You'll notice this is under Katina, under tools, under Colorado Collaborative. There's a bunch of Colorado resources because a bunch of Colorado agencies have worked with us over the years to define a bunch of these. And then a page specific to the low flow analysis tool. That landing page, that second link to the documentation, is going to include the link to the dashboard, the top one. It's going to include a link to a video tutorial. It's going to include a link to the user guide, right? You can dive in on the methods of why and what the assumptions are in DFlow and examples and screenshots. That's going to look very similar to what I've just presented you. At this point, though, I want to just highlight, we have a bunch of user guides, we have our webinars, we have our technical assistants that you can reach out with questions. We want to support these CDPHE dashboards and other OWSI products for you, the general public, to be using these dashboards and analyses in a way that's meaningful to your end goals. So feel free to reach out to us with questions with today's webinar, with questions in the user guides, the instructional videos, access to the tool, any sort of questions. That same URL that Sarah gave you, we can send information through and we can route it to the right person to answer it. I would like to say thank you at this point. This is the pre-canned version of the summary. So what I'd like to do with kind of the 15-ish minutes that we've got left in our 45, 50-minute presentation is turn it over to questions that you guys have. And then if anyone wants it, we can go into a live demonstration. Happy to do that next. But first, I want to answer questions before we do a deep dive on kind of any examples. So Sarah, if you don't mind giving me a summary of the Q&A, or if someone's got their hand up, I'm happy to take any of that at this point.
Great, thank you, Tyler. There is a question that just came through in the chat, so you might want to open it because it's got several pieces to it. First question is, are you running DFlow Fortran on the back?
Yep. Short answer is yes. We've compiled that DFlow Fortran code, source code, into an executable. It's a Windows executable, not a Linux or anything like that. So that we have a Windows compiler Fortran license that we compiled that down into an executable. That is inside of a CSIP service. Going back a few slides, if I hop back on my presentation to the beginning of all this, that sits inside of a CSIP service that is a microservice that literally just analyzes that particular piece of it. So over here in CSIP CFA, that executable sits inside of CSIP. It runs it. Anytime someone comes to the interface and says, go calculate this, it actually sends a request off to the backend, and CSIP CFA does all that modeling work with the Fortran executable.
Okay, and I think you actually mentioned this, but just to be clear, what Fortran compiler is used?
Fortran compiler we used was, I'm going to get the name wrong. It's Intel Visual Fortran was the compiler used for that one. This is years back that we put that all together because the executable is pretty stable after that point. To answer the second half of that question, I have it up on a different monitor and I'm reading it. Data cleanup before it goes in. Great question. So most of you familiar with USGS's data sets know that they have artificial flags in a lot of their data sets for ice influenced, for other conditions that are encountered in flow records that modify the accuracy of a particular parameter. Those flags all get tossed. So if you have an ice affected flow, we're not including it because there's not actually a flow estimate with a ton of those, especially a lot of the historic ones. They just said that there was ice back in the 70s and they never corrected it. So we drop those from the record, and we don't make an attempt to fill in any missing information, right? We don't do any sort of regression based an auto-regression based model or something like that you could artificially populate the missing intervals of the flow data. This is where I meant that the excursion clusters and the biologically based flows get real sensitive. So if you have a lot of missing data, those analyses are going to be very finicky to converge properly because of how sparse flow data sets can get in some conditions. Continuous flow records tend to work pretty flawlessly through this tool. As a side note to the units, yeah, there are instructions in the interface. If you were to follow, and I'll jump back down to the screenshot of the interface. If you were to go to this step and check the use uploaded data button, there's going to be a pick whether you're going to analyze only yours, the gauge record, or both, kind of right, all three of those options. Then there's kind of a help button that says, what units do I use? What's my format? What's my file format look like? Can I have an example file? What date format do you use and default to? What do you accept? All those things. I think that it specifically wants CFS, cubic feet per second. I don't think we ever built this with an eye towards compatibility with SI units like cubic meters per second or anything, but I know that it works with cubic feet per second, and all the documentation's again built into the tool.
Thank you, Tyler. Hopefully that addressed the myriad questions in that comment. I don't see anything in the Q&A, and that is the only chat question. All right, let me try and turn your microphone on. Okay. Rajbir, can you try to chat with us?
Yeah. If you can hear me.
Yes,
yep,
we
can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I was the one asking so many questions, but
you're fine.
I have
questions.
I have a question about like biologically based flow. You said it's arithmetic mean. I think it's harmonic means.
Yeah, I realized that as soon as I gave the presentation that the extreme value design flow is an arithmetic mean. This page has a typo that this should be a harmonic mean. Absolutely, I said that wrong. Everywhere else in the presentation, I credited it as a harmonic mean. Like if I go back 2 slides, you'll notice that
I you said that in the first one, yeah.
Yep, you caught me on my typo. I definitely missed that on my pass through.
Okay, I don't think Kurt, do you have? We have 2 people. Actually, we are working on the next version of DFlow. Okay, that's where it's coming
exciting.
from. But yeah, so but we were trying to compile the Fortran program, but we haven't been able to with the new compilers. Actually, Leahy was the original one, so we are unable to compile. So that's why I was asking about the compiler thing.
Oh, no question. It took us a minute or 2 to compile it too. The reason that we actually had a bunch of my master's is a bunch of compiled Fortran code for SWAT and ModFlow watershed modeling. So that's how I ended up working on this project, is I had an experience with that particular process of source code to Fortran compiler to executable. We actually ended up modifying, I think there's 2 inputs in there specifically to support the period of record analysis that we overrode in our local copy before we compiled it. But I don't think we had to do anything general as far as that Fortran file did or didn't compile properly. That always worked. But I know that Windows-based Fortran compilers are very, very finicky. And that was 15 years ago that we did this work, 10, 15 years ago. So I know that the newer ones are probably even more sensitive and harder to work with. So I wish you the best in your efforts to get that to compile properly.
Yeah, well, actually, right now, with 2 efforts are going on, compiling it and writing it, all from scratch. Really, that's what we are doing.
And out of curiosity, just because I did my master's on it, are you up converting to one of the newer Fortran formats? Was it Fortran 95 and Fortran 10, 2000 something? I forget the year on the last one.
Yeah, I think, Kurt, do you remember which Fortran compiler we are using now? I think it's Intel. We are trying to use, which should be the latest one, latest Fortran that's out there, standard.
Okay. Yep.
So, yeah. But
no worries. That's in the weeds. I was just curious because, like I said, I did that work.
And yeah, we ran into the same issue of how do you average? I think I found that in DFlow, they are doing look forward.
Correct.
Okay, not look backwards. Okay, sort of.
Yep.
And it's not the middle either, so it's look forward.
Yeah, it's not a
That's
centered
okay.
one. And our
Yeah.
analyses that we built by hand following the DFlow methodology were centered or look backwards based. And it's just like, oh, and they never wrote down in the documentation where their window started. But yeah, that one's a
Yeah,
forward based.
I did look backwards because it kind of made sense to me because you have the record for the last, so many days. So, but
Yep.
then I looked at the documentation, it says look forward. Yeah, so I had to change that.
Yep, we ran into the same problem, which took us down the DFlow road instead of the repeat the methodology road.
But I'm impressed what you have done. Thank you so much.
Of course. I'm still sharing my screen if you guys want to. Let's see if I can end my presentation. This is the live tool, right? So I can actually mess with this. It's a live web tool. You'll notice that you can zoom in and out. We have a series of map toolbars. You can pan and zoom. You can zoom in on a selection. You can return to your previous zoom extent. You can work with any number of other things, take a snapshot of the map and a legend and export all those fun pieces. You can do exactly the example that I ran, right? I can look for Boulder Creek and I can submit it. It's going to minimize my map. You'll notice that this is specific to Colorado. I can come in and either click on one of these sites and it's going to give me the summary data for it. Or I can pick on one of these and get the spot summary. Right, if I ran that same at the mouth near Longmont, I can either do the quick summary and not go any further in this interface and just let it do its thing. It's going to pop up a little tiny summary over here that's independent if I don't want to do all the extra steps. I can also leave that one and then go customize it, right? Maybe I only care about biologically based flows that are a 7-day average, and then I can go run that over here, right? You can play with that to your heart's content and get the summary out of there. Note that there is a lag in here because it's fetching the data set live every time. So you can see, you can zoom in on your map all the way down to some window that you're interested in. You can make this adjustable and see a little bit more of it. You can go all the way back to the data set. There's a box plot I didn't highlight. Flow data doesn't box plot well because so much of it tends to be outliers on the high end. But you can look at your box plot. You can do the same thing on the CDF curve. You can zoom in on your flow intervals. Like I said, you got the citations for the various pieces. You can follow up on any of the help documentation, right? Where these came from. You can follow up on the methodology. What is extreme value? What is biologically based? What is human health? Where did this come from? From DFlow source manuals from the early 90s, right? A lot of the statistics for this stuff is not new. And of course, if you want to just download the data set yourself, right? I only care about the flow data. I'm going to analyze it offline. I can get a copy of that just straight from USGS in their format. Note that that's going to create a pop-up. So if you click that button and nothing happens, double check that your browser's letting the pop-ups through. But that'll give you a little zip file that you've got your data set in here directly from USGS, right? Boulder Creek at Longmont, I'm pulling my discharge parameter. Here's everything with its flags and etc. Right? You can go to that level of detail. You can also, like I said, use the user uploaded data, right? You can either upload your data set or merge it, right? Do you want to use, if your data set and the gauge record overlap, do you only want yours? Do you only want theirs? Do you want the average, the maximum, the minimum? There's a whole bunch of merge methodologies that you can mess with. And when you follow the link for uploading, it gives you what this format's supposed to be, what the units are, right? So this is cubic feet per second. What are the date formats we support? Go upload your file. It's a text file, CSV file. So you can do all those pieces that I didn't take any screenshots of. But all of it's in here. I'm happy to run another example if that's of interest to you guys. You can clear your search history if you're interested. This will reset the map.
Tyler, Melissa has a question. I did turn their microphone on. Melissa, do you want to ask directly?
Yeah, sure. Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was wondering if with going along with using multiple sets of data, can you kind of merge like ditch data with stream data? Because oftentimes I'll have to subtract ditch flows from a stream. So is that possible with the tool?
If you do an offline and upload that as a CSV file, absolutely, right? You could take something, I'm going to do an example on the Pooter just because I can show you what it looks like. You can do an example on the Catch the Pooter River that you've got, for example, there's this gauging site that's on the right at the canyon mouth, and then we've got a few downstream ditches that take a lot of water out. By the time it gets to Fort Collins, this gauge site actually has a little bit more record. Modern, because this one's still maintained by USGS. This one's actually maintained by Division of Water Resources now. You could actually take these ditch records, which I never click on those well. Just show. You can actually take these ditches, right? So this is the Division of Water Resources, Larimer Irrigation Company irrigation ditch. This is not a stream, it's a ditch. You could absolutely use this tool to go fetch their record, right? Go download that data set for whatever period of record you're interested in. Let's see, they have data from 2004, it looks like, thereabouts. Download that, add that back in with the record here at Fort Collins, right? If I go back to my Fort Collins one, I can do that same process of downloading just the Fort Collins one. Oops, didn't want me to run both at the same time. We'll run one of them at a time. You could go merge those offline in a CSV file, upload that back, and just analyze the only analyzing uploaded data. Absolutely, you can do that kind of stuff out of this tool.
Okay. Yeah, so then I would just have to upload my own. It could be like an Excel file with the CFS listed. I calculated. Okay. And kind of a follow-up question to that. The stream gauges that you have available on your tool, is it like the entire DWR site? So like historic, active, admin decreed sites, well sites, or is it just active stream gauges? I don't know if you know that, but.
Great question. I got a two-part answer for you. So if we hop back and clear our search and hop back out to Colorado, right? Current map extent, reset search. The list of green ones, right? The green ones are the Division of Water Resources one. Those are a snapshot of the active sites from a couple years back. What we're actually working to do, this is our ERAMS 1 web framework. We are actually on ERAMS 3. We've got 15 years of software that's newer than this one. That's going to roll out this summer. The tool's actually in beta testing this month. That's going to have a much more modern version of this interface. That will be using a different set of APIs from Division of Water Resources for their list of any site. It'll be the historics, it'll be the actives, it'll be the administrative decrees. We're not going to touch the groundwater ones because groundwater doesn't have discharge in the same meaningful sense of stream flow as a discharge. So I can absolutely answer it. Right now, this is a static list that was a snapshot from a few years ago, but it's going to be a dynamic list here in the future.
Okay, awesome. So this interface right now is just the active sites, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then when it does get, the new one does get updated, will there be like a email sent out or something? I'm just curious.
It'll be simpler than that. We'll reroute the URL. So if you go to link to the tool, it'll take you to the new one instead of the old one. The documentation will be updated. There'll be a whole new set of everything. There'll be a new tutorial video. All those things will just reflect the new tool instead of the old one, and it'll reflect that in the documentation. That instead of, like I mentioned in my PowerPoint, I hop back one of the slides and represent that real quick. Instead of highlighting that we're actually using USGS and CDWR is an internal data set that's static. This chunk will move over here and be an external live data set instead of a static internal data set.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, I'm not seeing, I think we got to Melissa's question that she popped in the Q&A. I don't see any other questions in the chat at this time. Any closing remarks, Tyler?
I'd say let us know. Like I said, you're going to see a copy of this webinar go to our YouTube channel. You've got all the links to the documentation in the tool itself, as well as the links from it. Those sites are going to continue to stay updated as this tool evolves for the next decade, right? CDPHE is interested in their own personal use of DFlow and a few other things. I'll be curious to see what Rajbir and Kurt are up to on their updated D-Flow. I'd love to actually implement a new version of this that actually leverages whatever they're going to develop in the next couple of years. So reach out to us when that's done. We'd be happy to hear it and see if we can pull it into this tool and expand what it's got from the old one to the new one to both. And again, thank you for coming by today. If you have any follow-up questions, email us, right? It doesn't hurt. We'll get back to you. We promise we're not going to lose your email. We'll get back to you. And let us know if you have any issues or questions about using this tool.
Great. Well, thanks for your time, everybody. I re-added a couple links that I shared at the beginning to the chat. So feel free to shoot us an email or visit us online at aussie.colostate.edu. Hope you all have a great day, and we see you next month for our next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks.